For the older trees, we're going to improve health, we're going to improve fruit production, we're going to make them much easier to pick and care for. This one we went out on the field trip. Even with a ladder, how much of that tree can we actually get to?
Depends on how tall the ladder is.
Well, yes, but you can only get so close to the tree.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, if you have those basket pickers or something, but
Yeah, but
anyway.
even those are difficult when the branches are out of control.
Yeah,
You can't get in there to get them.
yeah. And that's one of the things I look at when I'm pruning is later down the road, am I going to be able to get in here to pick this thing? Okay. When do we prune?
When the sap's going down.
March, when you can.
The traditional wisdom was we pruned in end of January, February, and into March. In the winter months, the sap was down, on and on and on. Ain't much happening on the farm in January, February, and March, so it's something you can do. Well, Ma, I'm going to go out and prune on the trees. Yep. You can prune any time of the year you want to. It's good to avoid the period just before blossom, because by that time you've got a lot of tender buds that you knock off. That time of year also is pretty wet here, and the chance of getting bacteria and stuff into your tree wounds is much higher. But as I said, those water sprouts, start taking them off as soon as they appear. What if you've got damage? One of the reasons to prune is to repair damage. If you've got a limb that breaks, take it off. Do what you can to replace the doggone thing. So you can actually prune 12 months out of the year. I'll start here when the leaves come off. At that point, the sap is down. I can see what my tree is. That's the other thing to prune in the winter, is you can actually see where everything is. And you can start getting those necessary, not cosmetic, but virtually cosmetic things. Ideally, you have a tree that is balanced. It's naturally balanced, just a lot more of it. And a lot of it is non-productive and doesn't do you any good at all. And a lot of trees, especially if they've been around for a while, a lot of the pears are bad. The apples. What happens, and I'm kind of jumping around a little bit, you have these water sprouts that grow up. And they're a couple of years, and they get some fruiting spurs on it. Way up in the top of that tree are those nice big apples, are those Bartlett pears that weigh about a pound. And those weigh those branches, and they start to curve out. Once they start to bend over is when they start to put out fruiting spurs for real. Okay? So the next year, they get a lot of fruit on them, they hang down farther. I'm sure you've all seen these trees where you've got layer upon layer upon layer of branches that are hanging down. Virtually every branch underneath has to come out. Now, if you've got a real strong one, you can take one off from above it. But that's how all of these trees work at some point. When they get enough fruit on them, those branches bend over and start to grow down or hang down. And we saw this on this tree out here. If you paid attention, those big second top in it, and all of those had it curved out, and now they have branches going up from them. So that's what's happening. We can force that issue, and we'll talk about that in a bit. Well, anyhow, why do we prune? Gave you a lot of reasons. Another one is just to get rid of some dead wood. And crossing. If you've got branches that are coming from one side through the middle of the tree out the other, there's not a whole lot of reason to have that there at all. Get rid of it. Open your tree up. Okay. Pruning versus training. Training. Yep. Just like kids and horses and dogs. Start early and keep after it. But one of the things we do is we prune, we head back, we thin branches out, we shape our tree. We want a branch out here and a branch out here and a branch out here. Those are our scaffolds or our laterals. And if everything worked right, we'd go up on a central leader, and we'd put a branch out here, and a branch out here, and a branch out here. So we were alternating those, so they're not directly over each other. They never want to grow that way. So what we can do is we can train them. We can take spreaders. This is just a paint stir stick, notch each end, and where you've got a branch that you want to force out, prop that in there and start to get that spread. Another way is to use those discarded milk jugs. And you can put water in this or sand, and you can hang it out on a branch to bring it down. That accomplishes two things for you. One, it brings it down, which speeds up the fruiting process. Okay, now we've got this, oh, I'm bent over, I can bear fruit now. The other is you're pulling that into a position you want it. You may have to drive a stake and run a string and pull one over. But after a year or two, they're set and growing, and they're fine. Now what I did this year with these, actually it's a moth trap, moth and vinegar fly. You'll put equal parts of water, sugar, and vinegar in these things and hang them in your trees, and it starts to catch the fruit flies. Those are the ones that are in your cherries. Codling moth a little bit. Not sure how effective it is, but anytime I get one of them buggers, I'm happy.
What'd you say to put in it?
1/3 water, 1/3 sugar, and 1/3 vinegar.
1/3 everything.
Yeah, and you don't have to fill it. If you're using this as a weight, you know, just how much you need. If you're using it for a bug trap, then about that full.
Which kind of vinegar?
Well, cider vinegar works best.
Okay. Does it really work good on the cherry fruit flies?
Don't know. I tried it on just one tree this year, and it only had 3 cherries on it anyway, so.
I got one. Before we get too far along, you said that we could trim any time of the year.
Yes.
I have a client that he asked me to prune his apple trees for him. And it was this time of year, and it was a couple years, 3 years ago. I trimmed them, shaped them up nice, started training them. He didn't have no fruit for 2 years after I trimmed them, and it had been a really producing tree up to that time. What happened?
How old was it? Was it an old tree?
It's an older tree, yes.
Yeah. And So you did the whole job in one
Oh yeah,
pruning?
sure.
A tree, actual fact, older trees, you need to take about 3 to 4 years to get to where you want to be with it. Take no more than a third of the canopy each year. Okay?
Same thing on the plums. It was an old plum tree.
And it did the same thing?
It did the same thing.
Well, one of the things we've got going on is we've had these back-to-back really wet springs. We've had lots of rust and fungus and a lot of harm to the pollinators. And some of the trees that I care for were about breaking branches 4 years ago, and I haven't gotten enough off of them since to even worry about. And what little I got was in such poor condition, and it's all weather related on those. And this year we had those hard late frosts,
Right.
about 2 or 3 nights in a row, and all over town especially. You know, one yard, here's a prune tree that's breaking branches. Right next door is one that never had a single fruit on it. And that was, you know, the frost caught the buds at the wrong time. So there's lots of things going on. But with an old tree, we want to not hit them too hard. And sometimes, most of the time, I don't follow that rule because I've got to get them done and get to another, and I can't be waiting. But if you can, if the client or yourself can see yourself doing it, you need to just, okay, I work these out this year, and then you want to maintain a balance, but have a 3 to 4 year plan of where you're going to wind up. Because what happens too when you hit them that hard, they come back looking like a chia pet.
Yep.
And so everything's gone into that replacement growth. Pardon?
And not into making the prune.
Right. And because you've hit them so hard, you've lost a good share of your fruiting spurs.
As it does come back, you know, hard and heavy, you trim them as soon as they come back. All the
Yeah, and that's again where you want to tear those as much as possible. Some, you know, you need to watch. Some you'll need to use as replacement laterals. You know, if you've got one in a good place, get it guided to where you want it, or where it'll, in a couple of years it'll have fruit spurs and be going. But you know, and it comes down to time. Who's got time to go back through all the trees and smear off all of those little water sprouts? The thing that happens is everybody comes in later and cuts them off with the clippers, and they don't get down into that collar, because you can't usually where they're at, and you don't get rid of the latent buds. And that's why if you wipe them or tear them off, you damage that. Now, I'm sure you've all read books and stuff where it says, you know, that you want to undercut your branch and then cut the top so it doesn't tear. Well, we're talking much larger pieces of wood, and you're going to get a big tear if you don't. And, you know, it'll be this wide and this long, and that's a problem. But when this is all you're doing, it's not an issue.
when you rip those off like that, do you go back and put stuff in there to keep the disease bugs from getting in?
No. All of our trees have some real natural, think of your bloodstream. You have clotting agents. And if you're not on blood thinners, I haven't taken a whole bunch of aspirin, your blood clots up pretty well. with your fruit trees, same kind of thing. You've got sap and stuff, and they just automatically glaze over those wounds. The only time to even consider it if it's just huge, and then it's iffy whether it's actually going to do any good or not. Trees are surprisingly hardy. I've got a pear tree I care for, and it has where a scar was down one side. It's long rotted away. There's probably that much shell. This tree is about this big, and this shell comes around 80%. It's got old knot holes in it that are gone, so you can look through the tree.
So your Cambion layer is the only thing that's holding it
The
up.
only thing holding it up. I got 8 bushels of pears off that tree this year. I got to get a graft off of that onto something else because it's really a good tree. Okay. Okay. Training, pruning, start early. Be consistent. Start with a plan in mind. And that plan may be, am I going to have open center scaffolds, or am I going to have a central leader with laterals? Either way, go with it. And then stay with it every year. Stay with your plan. Keep your tree going in that direction. It'll be okay. It'll work. But the worst thing you can do is go, okay, I'm going to have a central leader in 2 years. No, I think I'll go with an open center. No, well, okay, what am I going to do? And that's a problem. You saw out there, you walk up to a tree like that, out on the back corner, it's like, okay, where do I start? Well, I'll start with the things I can reach from the ground. Then I bring in the ladder and go from there. So in that particular tree, I'm going to play with getting those crossover branches, getting that opened up, and then the next step will be to go up high and take that top out of it that isn't doing us any good. And then from there, we'll play with it. That one is already designed for us. We just have to bring it back to what it was. Go ahead.
I was just saying, when you're, we have old trees, we just moved into a house, and to bring it down, the central layer, to bring it down, is there a certain place you cut it, just above one of the lateral branches, or give it some
Yeah,
or what?
yeah. You'll want to be just above and not very far. If you're on a vertical branch or a leader, we're talking a bigger cut, so you want to slope that. Otherwise, you're going to have this flat thing, and the first thing it'll do is that will scar around your cut, and the cambium will grow over, and you'll wind up with a cup that holds all the rainwater. So you want to try to design that so it'll shed that water. Okay.
Now, the one tree out there, that when you say taking off the top, there were, like, it went up a ways, there were like these knobs. Is that where you're going to cut?
Yes.
Up just above the knobs?
Yeah. Just. And the main reason there is that's what we've got. I can make a real tall tree out of that and get rid of all those lower branches, but those lower scaffold branches are good sized, and that's what the tree was. And then it was allowed to put those new vertical branches up. And so we're going to go back to where that level was. Now, why it was cut there, it's hard to tell. Probably somebody from the co-op did that. There's no rhyme or reason. It predates Ray, so he's safe on that one. But that's what we're dealing with. So sometimes on these trees we have to, or quite often, we have to go with what we're given and try to, it's like we've got lemons, we'll make some lemonade out of it. But we'll play from there.